my name is Tony Grillo. Welcome to my channel, Wisconsin Hugs. And, went to church yesterday, and it was an interesting message about mental illness, and I thought maybe I'd share a few things that I learned from that mass. You know, we as human beings, we tend to get ourselves caught in a negative loop, and we have to realize to ourselves that what we say to ourselves actually matters. It's called the law of cognition. And the law of cognition works like this. What you think leads you to believe, which leads you to feel, and those feelings eventually lead you to what you do in your life. And this pastor right here, Craig Groeschel, he says that your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. Negativity isn't good for us. And so we have to learn how to silence our negative thoughts. Negativity has a negative impact on our mental health. We can choose our thoughts and how we live our lives. Our brain tends to stick to negative biases more than positive, so that's the trick. We have to try to tilt the scales a little bit. Negativity starts to become a habit, and it begins to fuel our thoughts. And then the next thing you know, you're living in a perpetual negativity loop where everything you see has a negative impact on your well-being and your mental illness. So there are 4 areas of negativity, and you have to define the problem before you can solve it. So the first one we have is relational cynicism. And this is known as a general distrust of all people. You believe everyone is out to get you. So basically you have a general distrust of everyone. Number 2, negative filtering. You always see the worst in everything. You always see wrong at the expense of what is right. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And then 3 is absolute thinking. It's either all or nothing. It's like, if a lady hurts you, then all ladies are bad. And then you have the final one, the blaming. You always see yourself as a victim. So for this next part, I'm going to talk about how we get past negativity, and I'm going to use pictures that came from the sermon with this pastor here at the Ridge Church in Greenfield, Wisconsin. Basically, what he has done here is he quotes Paul. Paul has written about how to change the way you think and to do it spiritually. That you need to have a spiritual way of thinking. And this is what Paul wrote. Those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on what the flesh desires. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds set on what the Spirit desires. The mind governed by the flesh is death. but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. And the Apostle Paul wrote that in Romans chapter 8, verses 5 through 6. Now, the pastor had told this story about David. He wasn't the king yet. Saul was the king. Saul was the first king of Israel. And Saul was very jealous of David. David had defeated Goliath, and David was winning many battles, and the people were looking at David as being their leader instead of looking to Saul. And so Saul had been chasing David around, and there was like a kind of a civil war going on. About 400 men joined David's side, and they basically vowed obedience to David, and so there was this battle going on between Saul and David. And when David and his men reached Ziklag, they found it destroyed by a fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. Now, at that point, David sensed that his men were going to turn on him and wanted to kill him. And David basically was fearing for his life, but he found strength in God. David felt like he had enemies everywhere. He had enemies with King Saul. He had enemies with his own men. And he would say this prayer out loud over and over again. He'd talk to himself and say it out loud. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. And this is written several times in the Psalms. David wrote most of the Psalms in the Old Testament. But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. And here's another psalm that David wrote. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. Well, it turns out that David, these weren't really his words. He was quoting Exodus. And in the verse of Exodus is one of the books that Moses wrote. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. And basically what David was doing was he was, reminding himself that God is the way to go. And that he just had to trust God and put it all on God, his life and everything, and serve God. And he would get through this terrible time in his life, and eventually he did get through, and he became the second king of Israel. And this is a psalm. I believe David also wrote this one. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yield its fruit in season, and whose leaves does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. And so that's kind of what he's telling us that we have to be. You have to change your mindset. You have to be a person that is like a tree which produces good fruit, and they nourish everybody that comes in contact with them. So in regards to relational cynicism, which was the first part of the it's part 1 out of 4 of negativity, and it relates to where you just think everybody is out to get you. There's even one example I was reading about where this man actually went to his wife and said, you must be really desperate to want to be with me. I mean, that's how bad it can get, that he actually put her down because she wanted to be with him, and he felt so bad about himself that he put her down. So again, Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 through 32, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another. And I think even for my YouTube channel, that's what I need to do. God, I choose to believe the best about others. Negative filtering is always seeing the worst in everyone, even at the expense of truth. So in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, Paul writes, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And so that's what we should be thinking about. You know, all those things that are admirable and lovely and pure and noble and true. Like, you know, even like thinking about my girlfriend, Elizabeth, you know, I mean, you know, she's very loving and she's faithful and she's funny and she laughs at all my dumb jokes, and she puts up with my YouTube stuff, and she's just an all-around sweet person, good person, noble person. And so that's what, you know, when I think about her, that's what I think about. And she makes me smile when I see her. Alright, now we got to absolute thinking. And absolute thinking is like the black and white, or you think everything is one way. Like, you know, all Democrats are, you know, or all Republicans are, or, you know, all pastors are, and you fill in the blank, you know. There's good and bad everywhere, in everything, in every profession, in every, you know. And so let's read what the Bible has to say about how do we get rid of absolute thinking. This was something that Jesus had said, and it's written in John, book of John, chapter 13, 34 through 35. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. So love one another, and that's what we need to do. That's what I need to do. I need to love everyone, you know, especially with my YouTube channel. You know, I went on the attack on people, and instead I should just try to love them. And that's what I should be doing, and that's what my channel should be about. Get rid of the negativity. I might not get as many views as I have in the past, but at least I will be living a life, a spiritual life. I'll be going down a spiritual road, and I will have peace. And that's what we all want to do. We want to have peace. I mean, you don't want to put up a video where you slam someone and then you gotta sit there and go, okay, you know, how many people are going to hate me because I put this video up because I slammed this person, and then the person you slam, you know, they're going to see it too, and you're going to make them feel bad. And that's something I shouldn't be doing if I want to be a true Christian and I want to live a life of peace. You know, I shouldn't be worried about getting views and growing my channel. I should just be worried about myself going the right path and living a spiritually good path, being a tree that produces good fruit. This is an absolutely great phrase right here. I don't know if this came from the pastor or comes from the Bible, but this is what I need to do if I want to be a disciple of Jesus. God, I choose to treat people right over being right. And I'm going to read it again because I think it's just that good. God, I choose to treat people right over being right. And that's what I need to do. And that's what my channel needs to be about. Okay, now we're at number 4 of negativity, and that's the blaming one. That's where you have that victim mentality where you feel like you're a victim. And that seems to be very popular. You have, you know, the Me Too movement, and hey, I'm not knocking that movement. There's a lot of bad things that have happened, and you know, a lot of good has come from that Me Too movement, and so I don't want to knock anything about that. You know, at the same time, you want to keep yourself away from that victim mentality because it puts you in a negative loop. And so let's see what the Bible has to say about that. For everyone born of God overcomes the world. That is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world? Only the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. And that's written in 1 John chapter 5, verses 4 through 5. John basically wrote that about Jesus. And that's how you overcome the world. And that's why instead of thinking about worldly thoughts and worldly desires, which will only lead you to death and despair and negativity, you need to overcome that. And it's not easy. And that's the thing. It's you have to change the way you think. I have to change the way I think, and that's why it was a good thing I went to church, and I needed to refocus what my channel is going to be about. God, I choose to live in your victory and not be a victim. And you know, it is good to talk to yourself, and when you do talk to yourself, be positive to yourself. You know, Dr. Paul David wrote, "No one is more influential in your life than you are because no one talks to you more than you do." I know one of the things that I do is I tell myself over and over again, I refuse to be sad. I refuse to be depressed. I want to win. So I have to do things to put myself on the winning path, on the path, the spiritual path of goodness and positivity.